Today we're talking about something in front of mind with pretty much every farmer around Australia, well, even around the world, to be quite honest. We've had this massive increase in fuel and fertiliser prices as a result of the war in Iraq. So we're talking, for those listening to this later, we are in, what month? We're March 20 at the moment, in 26. So there's price and supply uncertainty and things that are putting pressure on farm business. So I've invited Cam Weeks from Planfarm to come in and really help us nut this out, and let's talk about what we can do today. Thanks for taking the time to come with us today.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
The poison chalice.
The poison chalice.
Yeah.
Now, Cam, thanks for coming in at quick notice, because, look, you've been off the back of doing farm reviews and budgets for the last 3 months?
3 months.
Yeah. And now, off the back of that, we've got this war, which is pretty much thrown a cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to budgets and cash flows. You're sitting inside a lot of farm businesses right now, well, on the phone, really. How are they actually feeling, and how serious is this moment in reality for a lot of farmers?
They're feeling pretty nervous. I mean, I should add the budget period, it was consistent, even though we were mostly reviewing outstanding results in 2025, the forecasts before the fuel and fertiliser price and supply issues emerged were squeezed anyway. So high input costs, if you budget, which we always do on average yields, average prices, budgets were squeezed to start with. So people, I think generally, were going into this year feeling a little bit apprehensive. So now you put this on top, and there's quite a lot of apprehension. There is a lot of variability too between regions and how much product, fuel and fertiliser people have already procured and have on farm too. So there's a lot of variability out there.
So going to that, so are we finding, or you're finding that variability is, what you're talking about is clients who've managed to secure supply by forward buying, as opposed to those who have been hand-to-mouthing it a bit more, and you're seeing a big variation with those?
Yeah, there is. I mean, with fuel and fertiliser, I mean, it's worked just to literally, order that next truck of fuel, your fertiliser, particularly post-emergent, but even compound seeding fertiliser is really delivered just in time, because there's obviously cost involved in pre-purchasing and holding, but and fuel is a good example. I mean, some of your really big croppers have got significant fuel reserves, and a lot of people did have fuel tanks full because the price was actually very cheap. I think you were sort of averaging around $1.45 not that long ago. So that helped some that had storage and were setting up for deep ripping and those sorts of activities, but right through to people that literally are just waiting on the next delivery to actually start securing their seeding position. But fertiliser, the compound and seeding nitrogen that was contracted, from what we're told by the fertiliser companies, is secure. That's been turning up. If it hasn't already turned up, it's turning up now, and that'll be delivered over the next 6 weeks. It's the post emergent stuff that's at risk, and just because that's the way you operate, hand to mouth, doesn't mean that's been wrong until now. So maybe this puts into question, securing on farm, obviously at your cost into the future, because product and all your essential inputs, but it hasn't been possible for so many. And we were chatting just before making a coffee that the very high rainfall guys, in the southern areas that are literally applying fertiliser in particular throughout the whole year, as opposed to, say, a wheat belt farmer that in the extreme might be mostly at seeding with just one application post-emergent. So they literally, and it's worked, you just ring up, it turns up, but now it's not.
And I think that's a good thing to point with farmers in their own heads at the moment, is it doesn't mean anyone's done anything wrong, because the strategy has worked for a very long time. So there was no obvious existential risk that it wouldn't work again, was it?
No.
So there's no point beating yourself up about, well, I should have.
No, of course not. And with fuel, I don't think we'd realised how exposed we are in regional WA and Australia. I think, so much of the fuel is supplied via independents. And then, when push comes to shove, I think the big boys are actually looking after, mining companies, the city, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not fair, and we feel it's horribly wrong in ag, don't we? I think we just look at it politically and think, jeepers, it's just frustrating that we don't seem to prioritise food security in this country, but that is the way it's rolling, as it turns out. No, I don't think any of us understood how exposed we were to that.
And I think this is actually globally. So I'm going to be interviewing later on in a couple of months a guy from Italy. And interesting enough, about a few months ago, I was having a conversation with him, and it was almost identical issues. We think these are Australian issues, but they tend to be farming global issues, because farming as a percent of GDP in every country is now quite a small part.
Yeah.
So from an economic influence point of view, or a political influence point of view, it's not on the top of the agenda in nearly every country, really.
No.
So we put, so when you put input, when the costs jump this quickly, what are the real risks? So you're having conversation with farmers, and we've also got farmers around Australia who are facing this thing. So what are the big risks that we're facing? Margins, cash flows, or is it making just poor decisions under pressure? So where are you seeing the real risks here?
I'd probably say margins and making poor decisions under pressure. I think for certainly for some cash flow, this will squeeze already tight cash flows. There are a lot of businesses out there that cash flow is not a problem. I mean, our benchmarking that you're very familiar with shows that, thankfully, the average farm business is in unbelievably strong financial position. Mm-hmm. So that shouldn't be the problem, so long as they're doing the obvious things, communicating with banks early if they don't have room within their facilities, etc. But I think it's the margins and making poor decisions under pressure.
So to go drill down on the bank thing, so regardless of whether you've got a really healthy balance sheet, which a lot of our mutual clients have, or someone who from somewhere else in Australia or the world who doesn't have a healthy balance sheet at this point, the bank conversation you just brought up, is it really important to get hold and have a chat to your manager now and go, okay, this is what might be happening and what are our options and et cetera?
Always. Yeah, there's never a time where not keeping, your bank and your main partners informed isn't the right thing to do. The banks know what's going on. I mean, they probably know better than us. All the big banks have got some of the best intel in the country, haven't they? So, but I think hearing from the individuals, and I mean, if I'm an agri manager and you're a customer and you ring up, I'm happy that you've reached out.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're thinking about it, it's people that aren't thinking about it, potentially going back to making poor decisions under pressure, people that are perhaps operating in a bubble and don't talk to multiple people to try and think through what to do. So if I'm the bank, I'm really happy. So, yeah, absolutely reaching out to the bank.
So we're reaching out to the bank. If you've got an agri advisor like yourself or your colleagues, obviously get them in the loop. Accountants, tax, all those sort of stuff. Because there was a really interesting. I was talking to someone just this morning, and they were talking about essentially because a lot of people have had lots of really good years, they've got a little bit of tax running down in front of them. Is it getting your accountant involved too in a year like this?
Well, it can't hurt, can it? I mean, depending on your circumstances, so an option. I mean, subject to how this next, let's say, month, as we really approach the serious seeding window, unfolds. If you're in a position where you wind back cropping programs reasonably significantly, that might change tax planning that was well and truly in place as little as 3 weeks ago, i.e., forecasts for this financial year with normal cropping expenditure through to 30 June might have been a certain tax position. That might now be very different. Or the opposite, where, it's going to be full steam ahead for you, but you're now paying a heck of a lot more for, your key inputs. So it certainly can't hurt.
So in this case, it's just get the team of advisors you have around them. Now, that might be just your accountant, your bank. It might be your accountant, your advisor, and also business partners if you have them. Have those conversations.
Yeah. And I think I don't. You're not going to ring a single person, any one of us, that says this is exactly the right thing to do, because we're all operating with so much uncertainty, aren't we? But there's no doubt talking through your options to somebody else. I mean, I find that normally the client just finds the right answer themselves, but just by talking to somebody, and certainly talking to somebody which is our position that talks to lots, I just think that's always really helpful. I always think of myself, if I'm not sure what to do, just talking to somebody helps, doesn't it? So,
and often this is not just a farming thing. Often we know we just need someone to go, okay, I was thinking of doing this, and you go, yeah, that's probably a good decision.
Yeah. But also there are. You go back to your question about making bad decisions under pressure. I mean, I think it's a natural human, trait, isn't it? Is it under pressure? Our thinking is not necessarily as it should be. So I think too, hopefully we're not so in the weeds with you. We're not, and that'd be the accountant too, or the bank manager, just be able to sit back and say, well, hang on a minute, have you thought about this? And, so I think that's the other thing too, so that hopefully someone that is actually perhaps thinking very wrong, we can perhaps help right that ship.
So is it the costs themselves or the reacting to decisions probably the most dangerous bit? Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
Do you think the dangerous thing here is the cost or the supply itself, or just those emotional cortisol, adrenaline-based decisions, the risk of getting overreacting, really?
Yeah.
It could be a risk.
So, like an overreaction, I think for a cropper would be right now, I'm not going to put a crop in. And I mean, one of my clients, said to me a week ago, this is unfortunately how the world works now too, is that, I've heard the corporates aren't putting a crop in. I said, that's interesting. I've actually just spent the weekend with an ops manager of a very large corporate, and, they're not planning to do nothing, I can promise you. So I think the most important thing, first and foremost, is going to be getting the product. Because if let's just work on what we know at the moment, or maybe not what we know, but let's assume that you can scramble through from a fuel supply point of view. So, because the doomsday scenario is, I've got the fuel to put a crop in, but this actually gets really bad and I can't access the fuel, to manage it through to harvest. That's the doomsday view of the world, isn't it? So now we don't. I think that seems very unlikely. You might be tight. There might be some logistical challenges. I think it's a more reasonable assumption, unless we find out otherwise, that you're going to be able to scramble through. If not perfectly, you'll get there and be able to still manage your crop through to harvest. So the most important thing is always to have the diesel to put seed in the ground. Be very conscious of what it's going to cost you from the moment you seed, because if you assume you're going to manage that crop through to harvest, so that's your marginal costs, is, well, what are those costs and what break-even yield for what crop do I need? And I find this and drought times are the most, the dry summer, the late break, oh dear, this could be bad, this is where people can perhaps think through it wrong, because the chances of making a bottom line business profit might be much reduced. And if you're already budgeting on a break even to small loss, then things are perhaps going to be not great at the bottom. But that doesn't always equal do nothing, because any contribution to your fixed costs is a contribution. So the really important thing is to be really considered and go, right, if I drive the seeder into the paddock today, what's the cost of putting the crop in? What am I going to spend through to harvest? And this is where obviously the current cost of fuel, that's increasing the cost of the operations, but also fertiliser. So being really careful about considered about what am I likely to get my break-even yield? Because remember, you're in the game too. So there's nothing changed here. You're in the game, when the crop's in the ground.
So-
And sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but last year, and the year before were good examples of late breaks, dry summers. Most of the wheat belt, a high proportion of crop was in dry. The odd person pulled back, and then it starts raining late May last year, and we get the most remarkable growing season, this long finish. So it could have been dire, and pulling back was the right thing. But also you've still got a chance of a really good growing season, a really good outcome. So I think with nitrogen, because that's the really big variable now that we don't know what's going to be available post-emergent, it's really how much nitrogen have I got secured, and is that enough to grow a profitable crop, which is not necessarily my optimal crop.
So is this talking about nitrogen up front? So we've got to, oh, excuse me as well. It catches those frogs on it. We're talking like you've got dry land croppers around Australia, especially Western Australia, and you've got high rainfall croppers and as well. So they have a bit of a different dynamic with nitrogen because the high rainfall farmers have a leaching challenge that the lower rainfall people don't. So when we're talking about securing enough nitrogen to grow a profitable crop, are we talking up front or the whole season? Because of the high rainfall, people are used to having to put it on later because of leaching. Is it a different sum in people's heads or a different strategy?
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, you're certainly talking whole season, because, someone that has enormous UAN or FlexEN storage capacity might have, because UAN's been very well priced, they might actually have a lot of nitrogen that's guaranteed, and that might be enough in a high rainfall environment to actually grow a profitable crop, even if they don't have enough to grow the optimal crop in a really good year. They know they've still got enough. So very much different across the regions. In some ways, the easiest is medium to low rainfall and stronger, heavier soils, because you can actually put a lesser amount of N, and I'll pluck up a rough number. Let's say you've only got 30 units of N, and it's good, strong, red country, might be wheat on canola, stubble. You can probably grow a 2 and a bit tonne crop with that. If it's a 3 tonne year, yes, you'll fall short, protein will be low, but that's worth doing. Yet, if you're on sandplain and you've only got 30 units of N in the medium rainfall zone and it's leachable, what you were referring to, that's a different discussion. But then also, am I planting onto lupin stubble? So very much looking, I think people need to be looking like never before at paddock by paddock, rather than just, because a lot of big farmers also manage logistically big blocks for simplicity, and I think this is really a paddock by paddock.
So literally go down to land management.
You need to, yeah. So I think that's what good planning for a cropper would look like right now, isn't it? With your agronomist, whoever does your planning, revisit the plans. Have a look at paddock by paddock. What can I get away with? Can I grow a profitable crop with the N that I've got secured, or can I not? And start prioritising what's going to go in, assuming it rains and rains on time. And here in WA, there might be rain, this next weekend. So, but who knows? So start thinking through that.
When you're talking about utilising the nutrition in soil, you're talking about going on to lupin, or whether you're going to lupin or canola. Is it too late to go and dig some holes and really double look at your nutrient profile? Like, I noticed, I was listening that the amount of P in a lot of the mixes will be down and the optimum unit of nitrogen. So if you haven't already, or you've undercooked the analysis, is it too late to go and dig some holes? Or
it might be getting a bit, it'd be one for your soil, or for your fertiliser company, probably just to check in if it's too late, because I'm guessing they'd be getting pretty busy. Even just testing for nitrates in the soil, because a reasonable proportion of WA had really good rain. When was that? Probably 5-6 weeks ago. So when you get really good summer rain, usually you get some mineralised nitrogen. So even that knowledge of what I've already got in the soil. So I think that's an option. But again, you just think paddock by paddock, and one thing we know is that we're dealing with big stubble loads as well, and stubbles can tie up nitrogen too. So again, you might want to break your normal rules. For example, burning on appropriate soil types, to reduce that as an issue at seeding. So looking a little bit, maybe outside the square compared to what you might normally do is worth doing.
And around Australia, every region and every state has got such a wide variety of both rainfall patterns and soil types. So it's got to be very soil type and rainfall specific, this sort of advice, isn't it? Get your agronomists involved.
Completely, yep. Soil type, rotation, and your environment, your rainfall zone.
So strategy. So growers have put together a production strategy with or without an advisor. They've got their 5-year rotation in. So is it time, like you're mentioning, to start thinking about a shift in sometimes strategy? What I'm talking about in context is protecting margin as opposed to going for broke, as opposed to how do I feed this thing? How do I protect it? This incremental investment in, and let's talk about grain in particular because it's a bit more probably exposed than livestock. But, when I invest, how much I invest and what margin am I going to target as opposed to just keep feeding this thing until it breaks,
100%.
How do people get that in their head about, because especially if you're especially coming off the last few years, there's been some absolute cracker crops which they've had to feed like hell. Getting that out of your head and going, like, I want to grow not 3 or 4 tons, I want to grow 2.5 tons, and this is what it needs.
Yeah, definitely. And particularly with the price of nitrogen, I mean, if you've got it secured at the previous price of 3 weeks ago versus, I think you're looking at about $1,400 if you can get urea supplied today. So absolutely looking at margins with nitrogen priced, so high, and remember too, with nitrogen, and most people can probably picture a nitrogen response curve. Now we never know where we are on it exactly, but what we do know is the first 10 units of N are the best returning, dollars spent on nitrogen every year. And that's the easiest. So it almost doesn't matter what the price. If you're planting a wheat or a barley or a canola crop, then you just got to get that early bit of N on. It's the later units of N that are the poorest returning, and they're the ones that, let's face it, it's always dependent on how the season finishes. So I think that's important to understand too. There's early N and then there's late N, and that really comes down to, well, what do I think I can grow yield wise? How much N have I got, and working through that with your agronomist, because the price for that early stuff won't matter anywhere near as much as the price for the later, which is growing the optimal crop.
And that's it. And it's based on what's happening with the conflict now. It's so hard to know by the time you need that in early spring, I suppose. It's hard to know what supply or price is going to be like then anyway, do we?
Look, and I think, we haven't touched on this yet, but if we just go back to the supply piece, this is where you need to be, we talk about communicating with people, you got to be communicating, of course, which most people are, with your fuel and your fertiliser companies, because from what we're told as late as the end of last week is that the nitrogen that's already secured, and effectively it's seeding and very early post, that's going to be okay. It's the later stuff, and as every day and week of this conflict goes on, it looks more and more likely that you actually might not get the post nitrogen. So again, that's where rainfall zone probably matters. The very high rainfall zones can get away with later N, so long as they've got enough up front. But if you're in the wheat belt proper, it's mostly got to be on relatively early. So I think that's probably an important thing to be thinking, all right, well, what if I don't? What does that mean? And what does that mean to my chances of growing a profitable crop? And that's where the variation between what someone's already got secured versus the person that doesn't have anything secured will be great.
And going with the key tenet of hope not being a strategy, how far out should we be looking at the moment? Because the conflict is, as we stand today, on the, whatever it is, the 20-something of March, 23rd, I think, actually. I said the 20th before, I think. It's not looking great. So, and we've got no idea what's going to happen. So, how far are we talking 6 months, a year? So how long in time frame should they be sitting down, getting their cash flow out and revising? Is it hand to mouth at the moment, just getting it in the ground, or they should be looking further out across their whole budget?
I think for everybody, the immediate decisions, which look, we're talking this through the seeding window, aren't we? They're the really important ones. And that's what everyone should be really carefully working through. Remembering too, I mean, it's the 20th of March. It's not the 20th of April. It's not the 20th of May. So Australia-wide, we do have a fair bit of time to act before we get really into that seeding window. But I mean, barring getting really early seeding opportunity. So I think that's going to be very useful, because what we're all learning as every week goes by is a lot, isn't it? So we'll know a lot. I mean, if this conflict is still raging in 2 or 3 weeks' time and the strait hasn't been opened up, I mean, I think it's a pretty fair bet that you're going to be lucky to get post-stem nitrogen. Now, again, the fertiliser companies are working overtime trying to find alternative supplies, so that may change, so you stay close. So you can factor that into your planning. So, I mean, the planning needs to be A, B, C, D, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I mean. So let's get into cash flows, because this is, what both of us do for a living, really. But but you've got a budget in front of you, regardless of what's happening. You've built a cash flow. Is it about what's the strategy? Just pull up the one that you did in February with someone like yourself, Cam, or however you did it, and just start running scenarios based on a whole lot of, I suppose, what ifs. What if it does open up? What if it doesn't open up? Is that what you're sort of going through at the moment? Or if someone's got someone like you doing it, that's sort of one thing. But if they're doing it by themselves, what would you say to them?
I think so. Sometimes starting in detailed cash flows, though, can be starting in the wrong place.
Okay.
I think, because you're sort of in the detail. I mean, I talk a lot to my clients and also with our team about jumping in the helicopter, so to speak, first, and that's always my preferred position. So I think the immediate decisions are around: do I or don't I plant? Do I change rotations or crop types? What are my alternatives? So I'd start there personally, just looking at marginal returns. And by marginal, I mean everything you've spent to date. Remember, it's spent. So forget about that for the time being. What you're hoping to do is still make a decision, grow something that can contribute to that money already spent, or the money you're going to spend for the rest of the year. So I'd focus there, which is really, what's it going to cost to seed it? What's it going to cost to manage it, all the way through to harvest? What's my break-even yield? Which is, you can do it on today's pricing, but I mean, if this is the doomsday, then prices will go up.
Yeah,
one would assume.
Well, this is going to affect growers across the planet, isn't it?
It will. Yeah. So it's not easy. You're just looking at sensitivities, aren't you, right now? And that's where I'd start. Then I think certainly into cash flows, revised forecasts, particularly when it becomes a financing question. And then if you think your question about into the following year, I mean, if you're a really strong business, which a heck of a lot are, but plenty are also in a more vulnerable position, the reality is you'll roll into next year. If the worst case scenario is you run a pretty solid loss this year, you'll have to borrow more next year, one would assume. And if you're in a really strong position, whilst that feels bad and you won't enjoy it, you'll be fine. And the impact for the following year, from a profitability point of view, is you'll have a higher interest cost, particularly as we've got interest rates looking like they're going to go up too. So, but if you're in a more vulnerable position, that's different. So I think forecasting through, but I don't know that now's because we still don't know what's going to happen between even just now and the end of May, early June, through the seeding window. So I don't think you want to get too distracted by that yet. It's just make the best decisions when it comes to this winter season that you can. And if it's looking really dire or looking like things are stacked against you, you've only put in half a program or whatever it may be, I think that's when early June, July, let's forecast through to year end. Let's maybe do an early draft on the following year. Go back to your bank, let your bank know what your position is, etc.
And is that about, we're talking about making decisions based on facts rather than feelings and emotions and those sort of things. So it's not about, this might not be the right time to review your whole cash flow, but you want to check your margins to make sure you understand them. And then whether you need to plan to the end of the year or 24 months, sometime through the year.
Yeah.
But is it about whether they be revisiting it with their advisor or by themselves, just keep revisiting it based on the data you have at the moment, so you don't overreact, like cost? For example, cutting too much costs, for example, could be just as bad as not cutting enough. Is that?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that's where, again, it's very business dependent. Because, I mean, we're probably talking around without saying it, the word risk, but there's so much risk, isn't there? I mean, there always is.
But this is the nature of very modern farming. The risk profile is
risk
high.
profile's high, and now we're talking all this uncertainty, which all that does is it just increases the risk. So that's something with all this decision making. Of course, I'm talking margins, but margins aren't black and white. We don't know whether it's going to rain. We don't know what grain prices are going to be, etc. Let alone whether you're going to get the fertiliser you need. So being very aware of risk. And look, the business that has low overheads, not a lot of debt, low interest, they're not leasing land, they might not have big HP repayments, their own personal drawings might not be a lot relative to the size of the business. So the cost of or their capacity to wind back a program will be greater than someone that's the opposite.
So this is about fiscal flexibility, really. That I don't mean. So what I mean by that is, can you, for example, you might have a healthy balance sheet and you have, for example, a capital replacement schedule and a whole lot of other stuff, but you might have options just to kick that down the road for 12 months. Or is that, so the ability to flexibly not maybe bring on new debt that you don't have to?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, most definitely. And that's the thing. There's just no such thing as one size fits all, is there? But yeah, that flexibility is really key. And I mean, we haven't talked about, it's all about cropping, but there's the mixed farms. Livestock are looking pretty attractive.
They
at
are
the
looking
moment.
pretty good. So there is, and that was actually going to be my next question. Thank you very much. Livestock guys, like especially mixed farmers, especially the ones who've got higher percentage of livestock, we're talking 40+%. There's also that option. Can they, for example, not sell dry sheep or cattle? Can they keep, they might have some, maybe to drop a few hectares out of grain. So that's also an option they might have as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, anyone that's got a pretty decent percentage of livestock, well, I mean, their results last year would have been, partly supported by, selling sheep at far higher prices. Wool's now, gone up a bit as well. So, their budgets were often looking better. They were some of the real challenging budgets going back as little as 12, certainly 24 months ago, but they were looking quite solid. So that puts them in good stead. They'd be feeling quite justified in hanging tough, wouldn't they? And,
yeah, I know.
So, yeah, there will be some options there. I mean, we've sort of been getting asked, does buying more sheep and having less crop, but that's a pretty tricky scenario too, because you're paying a lot.
That's the thing. If
sheep,
every farmer in the country is going, well, I might go out and buy a couple of thousand head to it, suddenly that's going to have an impact on sheep prices, I imagine.
Yeah, and just is there the supply anyway?
And is there even on stock? So there is, but again, you're talking about going with margins first, Cameron. So it's talking about, say, let's not jump at that. For example, you might go, oh well, I'll just drop, couple of thousand hectares out of crop and put them in sheep. I'll go get some sheep. But that actually might be fiscally a bad decision. Yeah. You might be better off to put the crop in.
Yeah, correct.
Just be aware of that. You're talking about start with your margins.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean your sheep margin or your cattle margins are going to be better just because the crop ones are tough.
No, exactly. Look at each of your enterprises. Look at your options. Have you got, a really good mixed farm? One of the things that makes them really profitable, good mixed farms, is they do have flexibility, swinging, a percentage between crop and livestock. And, the season hasn't broken yet. It hasn't started. So we don't know whether it's going to be a good, well, certainly for a lot, some of Australia it has, but for a lot of Southern Australia it hasn't. So we don't yet know whether it's going to be a good past year, let alone a good cropping year. So, that's why now it's still very early, which... Let's look at that positively too. We can use that to our advantage. We don't have to be able to make the final decision now, sitting here in March. You really need to be making those decisions from mid to late April through to the end of May, don't you? And I think time can probably be our friend this year, because if things don't get better, they get worse. Well, in a month's time, we'll know that, or in a couple of weeks' time. But they may improve, and hopefully they do. And some of these concerns are at least partly allayed, and then you can go and commit to whatever your program with that knowledge.
And this is a good point for now the farmers who are running two crops a year, especially the guys that are higher up on the East Coast and more opportunity, have a different sort of workflow, different production workflow to this. But when we were talking before about risk and making bad decisions under stress, so but you don't have to rush, is what you're saying. So we're saying, okay, just sit down, take your time. Run the numbers, get some third-party help to get you to, just get outside of your own head.
Yeah.
You do have time. You don't have to rush this stuff.
No, that's right. Yeah. I was chatting over dinner last night to a friend who, up until recently has been an owner and a manager of a very large business, and we're talking about COVID and what it was like with all of the uncertainty in COVID, and they were faced with, possibly standing down a lot of staff. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this exact thing about not panicking and making decisions under stress. And initially he was bucking back against me a little bit that, I know, but if it's really bad, it's really bad. But no matter how dire the circumstances are or may become, when does not trying to think clearly and rationally and focusing on what you can control as opposed to what you can't not be a good thing. And that's, I think, the most important message. I mean, anxiety will be up to some people's foreheads, up to the top of my bald scone, So that's real, but, just being able to step back from that and think about what can I control here, not what I can't. And any mindset guru in the world will tell you that's one of the great challenges for humans, is to be able to do that.
But that's a really good point. And it's always been a good point, isn't it? It's like, it's, even getting the process of just sitting down and writing down the things that are in your control and the things that aren't in your control, and then going, oh, well,
yep,
those ones I'm just going to have to see, but I can control these ones, and let's see what options I have within the cards that I can play. Yep. That sometimes is confronting the brutal truth of the situation, isn't it? Rather than yelling at the sky,
Yeah. Look, I did write an article for our Landline, our monthly client newsletter just recently, and I was being a little bit cynical in it. But I've watched. Well, the cost pressures facing ag before this crisis are real, right? Mm-hmm. But the cost pressures facing homeowners, facing all business owners, is real. Now, ag has some particular, cost pressures that are unique to ag. So I think the machinery, escalation in machinery costs seems to be, the proportion of increase seems to be pretty unique to ag. But I must admit, I probably got a little bit tired of listening to complaining as opposed to the people that are feeling frustrated but I've got to get in and manage. And I think this is exactly the same. So look, we all get frustrated with various things beyond our control, but really successful people and business owners, they crack in and go, all right, well, what does that mean? What can I change? What can I control? Do I replace my machinery less often? Do I put on a few less units of N now because the price is so high? Do I tweak my cropping system? That's just taking control, isn't it? And this has just amplified that.
Yeah, so it's like every great business operator is, and in ag they're no different, right? They're very good at managing that, right? Just being pragmatic and going, I've got this, I haven't got that, I'm going to work on this, right? So stepping back.
Yeah.
And like you said, your friend who runs another business, or whether they're farming, it's the same thing, isn't it? I have a bunch of things that are in my control, and I'm just going to double down that. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to work that out.
Yep.
Right? And I'm not going to complain about the weather, the government, the whoever.
No.
Because that's not going to help me here.
No, that's right. And that's where with time comes new information. And back to the COVID times, I mean, what changed for my friend was that the government introduced was at JobKeeper. I think it was JobKeeper, wasn't it? Now that changed everything. So all of a sudden got access to some subsidies, met with staff. Staff all decided to take a haircut and let's all keep our jobs. And then the world's, rolled along, turned a corner, and life was rosy again. But so I'm not thinking we're going to see the government jump in and offer this. But my point is, in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks' time, we're going to have more information. Things will emerge.
That's another thing about decision making, isn't it? It's don't make decisions early just because you want to get them off your desk. Just make them when they need to be made, rather than because a lot of people, like you said, all the farmers around Australia or around the world are sitting there and they're going, especially in the southern hemisphere where we've got seeding coming up. But it doesn't mean you have to make the decision here in March.
No.
If it doesn't need to be made to May, make it in May, because you'll have another 5-6 weeks worth of information by then.
Yeah. But the important piece, isn't it, is the planning. It's the thinking through my options. With what I know today, this is what I would do, but that may change in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So I think having planning for the worst, hoping for the best.
Yeah, but it is. It's like plan to make the decision, but don't make it till you have to. Is that sort of it's do all the hard work. Know what has to be done. Know where you like you said, you're talking about break-even points, margins. Do all those numbers.
Yep.
And then when you need to make the decision, make the decision.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 100%.
Families. So there's a lot of families sitting around kitchen tables getting pretty stressed at the moment. Communication. So you deal with families as a living. And so we were talking about communication with all the stakeholders, banks, accountants, consultants, etc. What about family? Is this really important to keep that conversation going at the moment?
Yeah, or start it.
Period.
Well, because plenty don't. And, the stereotypical, position is that the main decision maker, stereotypically the male, is probably carrying a lot of this burden. There's no value in keeping it all to yourself. So your family will be, watching how you're behaving, how you might be getting stressed. So, yeah, I think if you don't communicate, then start. And there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's the right thing to do, to be going, I don't even know what to do. I've always had this, but this is really tricky. It's unique. But for those that do communicate reasonably, then build on that. I think probably even more important than talking to people like me, isn't it? First and foremost is family. And, as I said, being vulnerable and expressing your worries that what if this is really dire is worth sharing with your family, isn't it? And those closest to you.
Especially, it's interesting because you have all the dynamics. You've obviously got the primary decision maker, who was the generation who's running the show at the moment. You've got probably young generations coming on board. Some of them haven't had a bad year yet, so this might be their first really tough one.
Yep.
And then you've got all the support network around those people. In a lot of cases, it's mum. Sometimes it's others.
Yep.
It's understanding the pressure that everybody's going to be feeling in a different way. Let's say without being generic, because this is very it could sound sexist, but let's pretend it's dad sitting there stressing his head out, doesn't want to talk to him, but he's out of his head on this one. You've got a son or daughter who's been home for the last 7 years but has never had a bad year yet, and they're kind of like thinking the world's going to collapse on them. And then you've got mum going, God, everyone's falling apart on me. Having those, is it just about sitting down going, hey, we're all stressed about this, but in different ways, and just having that conversation? Yeah,
it is. It is. And then it's going to then be about, all right, well, we're all worried, but what can we control again? Let's all be there when we talk to the farm advisor or the bank manager or the accountant. Let's all be involved in this. Because remember, I don't think any parents have actually had to face not getting fuel potentially and not being able to actually put that crop in and fertilise it to somewhere near its optimal. The worst we've had before is the price through the roof as opposed to supply being the problem. So they're unique, aren't they? So
I can never, ever in 40 years remember not being able to get fuel.
No.
And I think that's I even talked to all our staff in the office. It's just the idea that you could go to the pump and not get fuel.
Yeah.
Seems like a third world problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So it's quite unique.
It is unique. But remembering too, I was talking to a client driving in here today that has got everything secured fertiliser-wise enough, and they're a higher rainfall zone. I think he said they had enough to put on 70 units of N secured. So that's worth everyone knowing too, isn't it? Because that takes away that fertiliser supply anxiety. Some fuel supply anxiety remains, but, they're also reassuring because, we've probably got the tendency where we're doing a little bit flipping to leaning towards the worst case scenarios here, but there are still businesses that are actually really well positioned, really well organised. They've got fuel, they've got fertiliser secured, and they're still planning to proceed relatively as normal. And that's worth knowing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you don't want people getting overly anxious, feeling like we're out of control here when they actually might have this under control and well thought through.
Well, that's what we were talking about before. It's about saying if you're in that situation, write down, I have fertiliser, great tick, I have this, I have that. Yeah, the margins are going to be pretty gnarly. Well, they were probably at the beginning of the year already, but, I might get a record wheat price. You've got no idea, do you?
No, that's right.
And so, but there is a bunch of stuff, and just getting that out of your head, whether that be talking to someone like yourself or just writing it down, at least you go, I got that. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I think
that's good advice.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Cam, what have we not talked about today that we really should be talking about in the context of the situation we are at the moment?
Oh, good question. We've covered a fair bit of ground, haven't we? And I don't think with any exact answers that was never the intent or the plan, was it? Because they are going to be unique to each individual. We probably haven't touched about grain pricing.
Let's talk about grain. So at the moment, I haven't looked lately, but, they weren't brilliant. But, how do people do that when they're planning forward with grain, especially the grain growers and for all different varieties? How do they look forward on this one?
Well, there'll be two seasons to be thinking about. There's a reasonable amount unsold coming out of last year, being such a big harvest. So still looking at last year and what are my targets, potentially revising them up a little bit because prices have lifted a bit. Barley and canola were actually good.
Yeah, they were really good.
It was wheat, and for the smaller number of lupin growers was lower. I think lentils, for eastern states people were lower too. So maybe just revisiting what your plan is for your old season crop, and then when you're looking at the new crop, is don't take your eye off the ball. I don't think we've seen prices get to where people might want to be jumping in and hedging for the coming year, but that could change. It is a different. And it was pointed out by our grain marketing team last week that it's a different scenario to Russia, Ukraine, because they were major suppliers of crop globally. So at the moment that started, we all assumed supply was going to be massively constrained and price went through the roof. So the Middle East isn't,
the same thing. Yeah.
No, but it might be the longer, as you referred to before, the longer scenario of, if everyone in the world plants less, fertilises less, production goes down, and by year-end prices could be up. So I think not keeping your eye off the ball, if a really good pricing opportunity, I think determine what that is. I don't know.
Is that starting with your updated possible break-even point? For example, I always think that when you're going to be, especially you're talking about taking forward positions on grain, regardless of where the price is at, knowing where you make money is probably a good place to start.
Yeah, it
isn't it?
Yeah, your break-even. We like referring to it as your master plan, which for a CBH pool manager is going to be their pool mandate, isn't it? But what's my plan? At what price? When am I prepared to sell? I think revisiting that. Let's say for example wheat, it could find its way close to 400. Is that sufficient for you to jump in and take a position? So I think people should be, if they've got a grain marketing advisor, which a lot do in WA, then they should be talking to them about the strategy right now and revisiting that. Remembering too that what you're if we're talking forward selling, what you're prepared to sell as a percentage of production, if we've got a question mark over how many hectares you're going to plant, let alone the usual yield at this time of year, what the heck's it going to yield, you want to keep that front of mind too, which if you've got the possibility of pulling back production as we approach seeding, then you just want to be a bit cautious, I think, with regard to what you might forward commit. I mean, look, I'd probably be brave enough to say I think grain marketing's low down the things to worry about at the moment, but just don't take your eye off it because there could be a really good opportunity emerge.
Well, you've got, when you're doing your gross margin analysis and your break even, you've got to look at both sides of the equation here, don't you?
Yeah.
But that's a really good point you made about, for example, let's say you do have restricted nutritional capability, especially the people with leaching issues, and you might not be able to grow what has been a long-term average yield in, say, wheat or canola or whatever. You've got to be careful not to over-hedge, don't you?
Yeah, completely.
Because you don't want to be selling grain you're not going to grow.
No, that's the world's worst thing. Yeah, which is, why the forward selling, for some people, they just don't do it. But even the more aggressive forward sellers are still, the price has to be really, really good to forward sell before I've even planted. So, and if you don't know how many hectares you're going to plant at this point in time, then you'd be pretty cautious, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I suppose, and that's just, but like you said, just keep it in mind, keep it active, talk to your grain market if you have one. But, it's like a lot of people get it in the ground, see it come up, see what's happening.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I mean, there'd be nothing worse than, the prices escalate in let's say the next couple of months to a really high point, and then everything somehow ends up being okay and production is really, really good and prices then fall away. And because you weren't even thinking of pricing, you didn't do anything. So it's just keeping your eye on all of the usual business factors.
But is that the fact for people, especially people who aren't used to keeping financially, what I call intimately involved with their forward forecast especially? So most people are really up to date with their actuals and their record keeping purely because, they have to be. But being active in your forecast, in other words, every X month, 1, 2, whatever months, revisiting things like where are we at with price, with grain, with margins, and just keep visiting that stuff and managing that moving target that it is to try and secure the best outcome over a year rather than locking it in February and just hoping.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And look, to be honest, not enough do that. Even people that use us, which obviously a lot of people, I don't think they check in often enough. Some people are just intuitively, some have this amazing knack at knowing that they're on track or not. But quite often we, do a budget comparison with someone mid-year and, that's good, we're on track, or that's disappointing, we're not. So, yeah, when you've got so much uncertainty, I think every time you get more new knowledge, i.e. I'm planning to plant these hectares, but then what did I actually plant? Or then that's probably the appropriate time, isn't it? All right, are we on track, off track? What does that mean?
I think it's just a fact that the more often you check, it's kind of like these tiny little risk mitigation things. It's kind of you're getting a whole year of risk and breaking it into small chunks, aren't you?
Yeah.
So when you check something, you go, okay, if something's going a little gnarly, you can catch it a bit earlier, or you can, look at options. Whereas you don't look for 6 months. It might have been run off down the track and it's out of your control already.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and I think too, probably a couple of things in there. One is, this is a really good year where you might be looking to pull back on all unnecessary expenses. So really putting everything under question, because if you can reduce a lot of unnecessary things in a year that looks high risk to be poor, then you should. Mind you, I say that with your eye on the future, as in next year and beyond. But also, I just think for peace of mind. We always talk about doing our sort of mid-year reviews, our check-ins with clients. When the season's tracking nicely, it's not that big a deal. But when things turn nasty, i.e. in a really widespread drought year or something, that's when it's worth getting in early and helping people process if it's going to be poor. What does poor really mean for me? And for some, that's okay, that's not so bad. For others, it might be bad, and that's where we really need to project into the following year and talk early to the bank. So I think that's really important. But So from a cash flow and just keeping on track, on top of things, there are multiple reasons why it's worth doing. Yeah.
You mentioned about managing, especially people often forget about this fixed cost portion of your budget or even your cash flow, and where you could pare back. Is this very much balance sheet dependent? Because some people have long-term plans around capital that sit on their thing, and if they've got a lot of our mutual clients have pretty healthy balance sheets, so they might be able to just rock on with that plan, or some that really need to protect cash flow.
Yeah.
Is that very balance sheet dependent, or should everyone really be looking at that, that fixed cost component of their business and just go through it a bit?
I think there's no harm in everyone doing that. I mean, I'm sure you look at your business, we look at ours and go,
constantly.
So
because they creep up on you, don't they?
They do creep up. And look, in good times, I mean, let's face it, for a lot of broadacre farmers, this has been a wonderful 5-6 years. Rising land values, casting that aside, just the sheer profitability has been staggeringly good. But it's been high production and some good pricing that's actually driven those really good results, hasn't it? So it is easy under those circumstances just for cost to creep in. So I think absolutely when you're worried about how this year's going to turn out, and it's a really good time to be looking. That's really important. But I think probably the other thing, and the thought I just had a second ago was when I mentioned about looking beyond just this year. I think that applies to your paddock by paddock decisions as well. So, we're talking majority of really good businesses here, and this year could be a financial hiccup, but you do need to keep your eye on next year and making sure that you're in the best possible position next year, whether that be rotations, weed control, stubble cover, but setting yourself up for the next year, because if you're a farmer and you've done it for long enough, you have financial setbacks. It's just part of the journey, part of the deal, isn't it? So, and we know that the best businesses just bounce back. Now, maybe next year's not the bounce back year. Maybe next year's, who knows, but just keeping your eye on the following year and your decisions now. Just think always as you're planning with your agronomist, or you're looking at, is it planted or is it not, or do I swap into this crop type, or is it more sheep here? Just what's the right thing for next year as well.
And so if you have the options, and a lot of good operators do have the options to take the hit.
Yeah.
But like you said, weed control is probably a really obvious one. Nutrition's a little bit more nuanced, but weed control is a real black and white one, right? You've got a crop full of ryegrass, and it's going to cost you. What does it cost to knock out a crop ryegrass out of wheat these days? I don't know. I'm not up to date.
Oh, I'm not an agronomist either, but
whatever. Let's take $50 a hectare or whatever it's going to take.
Not that much, but
I'm putting fuel and machinery in there, mate. Anyway, but let's say you're going to have to take that out. You just still spend the money because otherwise you're going to be controlling ryegrass for the next decade, aren't you?
100%. Well, if you don't plant a crop, what's the opportunity that's providing you with? 100% seed set control, isn't it? So really, it's a fallow or a grazed. For a mixed farm, that might be a grazed paddock. But if the focus is to get it back into crop next year because it's a good paddock, you want to make damn sure that you're actually not letting weeds set seed. So, turning that into an opportunity.
So almost like impromptu fallow opportunity.
It could be, yeah. And look, we'll have less hectares go in. The way we're sitting here today, there's nothing surer. And, we had less hectares go in because of the late break last year and the year before. So it's making sure that those hectares are then set up for the following year.
And is this the case? A lot of your clients do this already because of the advice your firm gives. But this idea of seeing it as a 5-year return as opposed to a 1-year return, fallow really goes into the margin for next year rather than this year, doesn't it? So weed control on a fallow is next year's crop cost,
effectively,
really.
Yeah. You've got to be able to fund it, don't you?
Yeah.
You wear it this year, but yeah, 100%. And again, the fallow example is very much a soil type specific thing.
Yeah.
If you're talking not planting a paddock in the West Midlands here in WA, which is, sort of sand, leachable sand, high rainfall, you won't be getting much fallow effect next year. But if you're, fallowing heavy country at Killarney, then you will, assuming it rains and you store moisture.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about people knowing their own stuff. People know what they can do.
Yep.
The farmers around Australia, regardless of where they are, know when they can do this and know when they can't do that. They obviously need to, sanity check half the time, just to make sure they're, on the right path. But they pretty much know whether they can fallow and it has an advantage or they don't.
They do, yeah. And if you think about, continuous cropping to a very, very high crop percentage scenario, I mean, quite often paddocks are just on the brink in terms of weeds or disease. And, it's when I say on the brink, maybe they're just due to come out for a year. This might be the year where the opportunity cost of pulling it out is the lowest. So, again, that's just a case-by-case scenario. Everyone will know that. They'll know if a paddock's close, it's on the brink.
But it is a good point. Stop thinking this is risk is high and this is a pretty a tough year. But to look at it as an opportunity, you go, well, I've got 1,000 hectares that has just been looking to break out for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe it is time to pull it back and use it as a rehab year.
It could be.
You don't know. I mean, talk to your advisor. Don't talk to us. But
no, 100%. I mean, look, again, here in WA, we've had, it's been 2 good growing seasons. The last year was a record crop. The year before ended up really very good as well. But we haven't had a knockdown go out, on a high proportion of the wheat belt for a number of years now. So we do have, weeds building up. So there will be some opportunities there if it's not worth putting in this year because of the margin.
Especially if this early rain comes, Cam.
Yeah, if it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, mate. To finish off, what do you think? There's one thing you'd love farmers, both in WA and the rest of Australia, to take away from our conversation today?
I think it's what we've talked about a fair bit here, is just take the chance to look at your options, to talk through things with, people that understand your business if you have them. It's certainly to stay close to your suppliers. And that's critical. I mean, farmers typically very much value relationships. Well, here's time to lean on them. I think it's worth understanding that they're under enormous duress too. I think we can miss that.
So they're feeling pressure the same as you
We can think
are.
it's just us. I mean, the guys in fertiliser companies, at the procurement end, have not had a weekend for 3 weeks. They've not, they're flat out trying to do the right thing. We know that, and we can miss that sometimes. We can make it all just about us and think it's just us that are suffering. The fuel distributors. I mean, it can't be easy being an independent fuel distributor at the moment. If you're not delivering fuel, you're not making money, are you? So I think having a bit of empathy for them as well. I mean, this is no fun for anyone, is it?
Yeah, and that's a good point. So, and about stepping back a bit, isn't it? Because the first thing we want to do is kind of like start thumping the table sometimes and going, I need my blah, blah, blah. But like you said, this is hitting everybody. It's hitting all the people that supply you, bottom line, as much as yours.
It is. As I was saying that, I was thinking though too, you hear there's a big range of how effectively those companies have been communicating with clients too, so that's pretty frustrating. Some have been very, very good and others not even returning calls previously. But yeah, I think just leaning on those relationships, planning, trying to stay calm. This isn't fun. This is not looking like it's going to be able to give you an optimal outcome this year, but it's just trying to make sure that in some years it's just minimising the damage, isn't it?
Yep, and what I've been hearing from you this whole time we've been talking is communication, whether that be with your suppliers, your advisors and other stakeholders in your business, your family especially. Just talk.
Yep.
Don't just sit there and suck it up and, just communicate with everybody, because everybody's in this with you.
Yeah, 100%.
And all the other farmers in your district.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, Cam, thanks for coming in today.
No worries.
And giving us your wisdom. And I hope you all enjoyed that, everybody. And I wish you the best for the coming season.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks for the chance to chat.
No worries.